Hello, Focus Family Community. Dr. Lisa Leveque here. The table is set, and the topic for the day is back to school. Because it's that time of year, I am joined here today by Dr. Thomas Leveque, who just happens to be my husband.
I am.
So, we're going to talk about what it's like to go back to school. Because at this point, we have both sent children back to school. We've been the receivers of other people's receptors of other children coming into school, into our classrooms, and we've seen the dynamics that happen at different grade levels. So we're going to talk about that and how important it is. So let me give a few of the important things about Dr. Leveque, Thomas Leveque. Thomas Leveque has been an administrator. He started as a teacher. Went into special programs,
I
and
did.
you can tell all that.
I did that. I decided to get, I went into teaching and got my teaching credential, and then I got my master's degree and administrative credential. Before I did that, before I went into administration, I went to UCLA and got my doctorate in educational leadership. So that when I left the classroom, I was on track to, well, the ultimate goal was to become a principal. That's what I wanted to do. But there were steps along the way, getting out of the classroom, doing stuff, working in the central office, doing all those pieces had to be put into place before I became an administrator. And Los Angeles School District, Unified School District, my first administrative job was at Marvin Avenue Elementary School, and that's where Lisa was a teacher. That's where we met.
Yes.
She liked me.
He liked me first.
I did. We can talk about that in another podcast. But you're right. In terms of experience of going back to school. I mean, we've all had that experience, right? We've all been students ourselves going back to school.
As children, we have to go back to school every year, and that first kindergarten experience.
Absolutely.
I don't think I cried. I was excited.
Me too. There's a story about my older daughter, Julie, who, when she went to school for the first time, kindergarten, she was up early and she was completely dressed. She was ready to go like an hour before she had to go to school. And so, we took her to school and she came back and she'd had a good time and all that. And the next day, she wasn't ready to go to school. And it was like, well, I did that already,
It was like I did that yesterday.
I have to do this every day, and you think, yes, dear, for the next at least 12 years of your life, this is what you're going to be doing. But the other thing that's funny is that as far as teachers are concerned, I think, is that we forget. We forget that when we went to school, when we decided, we were excited to go back to school. Weren't you always excited to go back to school?
I was excited to go back to school just because I was going to see my friends. But the interesting thing, and I'm pretty sure your experience was like mine, when we went to school, because we went to private schools that were based out of our church, didn't you find you had the same friends that you
absolutely.
saw 7 days a week?
Absolutely.
So
from first grade to eighth grade, really, the same kids.
Even to this day, I have friends that I met in kindergarten, and we were together every day of the week, either in school or at church or a function that was put on by the church, but literally every day. So the way school was then versus the way it is now is very different, because we find that well, wait a minute, we didn't finish talking about your journey through education.
Oh.
So after you finished being an administrator, you finished being an administrator and a school district on elementary schools, then you went on to be a trainer of teachers.
I did. I went to work as a professor for a small college, and I worked in their early childhood department and their teacher credentialing area and their master's degree in education and all that. And eventually, I became the dean of the School of Education for this small school, and that I thought was my dream job, and it turned out not to be my dream job. Actually, I found out that I wasn't very good at that. I was much better at being a principal of an elementary school than I was working with older adult children. And that's another podcast too, I guess. But it's when you are able to look at education, the whole spectrum of education, from pre-K through college, you get a much different view of education, and you have much more appreciation for not only the teachers, but you have a real appreciation for what kids go through. And because one of the things that I think has always been an issue for me is that, as we just said, we look forward to going back to school, but not every kid did, right?
Well, then, that takes us to where we are now. So, because since since even putting our children through school, like for instance, Grayson was excited to go to school, and then he wasn't. But that's a different podcast too. But and I looked at his picture when he was going to school for kindergarten. He has a little tiny little backpack.
I know,
and his
he
little
was so
shoes.
cute.
He was so cute. Oh my god! So he was all excited and everything, and same thing for all the grade levels because he always had a thing for learning. But it didn't stop there. It happened here in the home as well, which is some of the things that we need to talk about. Parents, when you're sending your children back to school, you need to be excited for them going to school too. Not just because they're going to be out of the house and you don't have to entertain them for the rest of the summer, but now making them excited about learning. And I do have a podcast coming up with someone who has a child with special needs, and we'll talk about that. But we wanted to spend time just to focus on what you need to do to get your child ready to go back to school because it's happening now. For instance, I already put in my first week of school last week, and it was an interesting thing because the way we do back to school now, now that I'm teaching online, and even in some schools in person, the first week of school isn't about curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
It's about acclimating students to being in school. Because they've been on summer vacation, they don't want to do anything but be on break. So do I, but that's another story. But we spent our first week playing games because we have these edu protocols where the students have to learn according to these games. And we have Fast and Furious, which is little games that are Blookits and Gimkits and different things, not sponsored. And but we have all these different kinds of games that we do with the students. When we're in person, teachers do little things to acclimate them to just being back in school. Little writing projects, things with the open mind thing we used to do, and give them a prompt and let them write for 5 minutes and see, just little things like that. But I do have a question for as an administrator. The first week of school, what was that like for you? The first day, what was it like for you? What did you expect to see?
Well, the first day of school is always a madhouse, really, because you have it's a day that parents are allowed on campus. Well, yeah, because most schools now have a closed campus, just for safety reasons. But this was a day where parents were able to take their children and bring them to class.
Bring them to the class so they could see where they're going to be for the next 180 days.
And the problem as an administrator is that you always had parents who didn't want to leave. They wanted to have conversations with the teacher. They wanted to do all of this stuff. And
especially
your job,
the kindergarten teachers.
Well, we'll get to kindergarten in a second, but because that's a whole separate thing. But getting then parents out, getting them, okay, you
Like,
did
please leave so
right,
we can actually
because
teach.
really, except for some kids, so it doesn't hold true with everybody, but most kids, they come to school, and particularly if this is not their first time in school, they're ready, right? They come to school, they know what to expect, and it's the parents that are most concerned about it. Is my child, is he in the class with the kid who was the bully of the last year, and things like that. So for an administrator, the first day is taken up mainly with parents saying, "Can I move my child out of this classroom because there's a kid in there that he doesn't like, or I'm not sure this is the right teacher for my child." So you have to calm all their fears and get on with the day. Now, kindergarten is the highlight, right? Because for a principal, I always tried to be there when the kids came in. So the kids are all lined up wherever they are, whether it's outside the gate. We've done that sometimes, or sometimes they're in the auditorium and they all gather. The parents are all
Yeah.
there and everybody's excited and you're there and the kids want to be there. It's one of
And
the,
we always would walk by and
yeah,
wave to them because
it, it,
they're so
they
excited.
are,
They
and
wave
they
at
want to be
everybody. They
there,
wave at the
and they're
pigeons.
so enthusiastic. And the parents, I mean, the parents are weird because their kids are going to school for the first time, and they don't know how they're going to act and how it's going to be, and they're afraid their child is going to not make friends, and
Wait a minute. Have you found that your criers were usually crying because of mom's
oh,
anxiety?
absolutely.
Because a lot of times you see children, they're standing there ready, and then all of a sudden mom is worried, and the child then starts to cry, and mom started the whole thing. But if moms would just, or dads would just go, this is going to be a great experience, and I'm so excited for you, then the child would go, oh, yay, I'm going to do
I'm
something
going to go to school.
new.
That's right. We're going to have fun.
But instead, mom was like, well, I don't know. And they'll overhear them talking to somebody, but I don't know about this, and I don't know anything about this person. And when my other child went, and now the little one is down, they go, and you're standing in the door going, oh my goodness, look what just happened. It's like, how would you
That's right.
deal with that?
Well, you can't. I mean, all you can do is reassure the parent and try to get them to leave. It's like that's that's
Hold on. What is your deal, dude?
He's like, I've been on long enough.
there it is.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So you're just trying to get them to go. You're just trying to get them to, and because what the teacher wants to do is get the kid into class and start there. Actually, I have two. One's a funny story. I think. I hope it's a funny story. The second one is not. I went to meet the kids. They were all kind of outside the gate, and they were waiting to come in, and the parents were all there, and this little girl comes in, and she's so cute. She has on this cute little dress, and she has this feather boa that she's wearing. She has these little gloves
At
on.
5 years old.
At 5 years old, and she has this purse. She's so cute, and she's really happy to be there, and so I also part of being principal is that you're out there with the lunch line. You make sure everything is going well at lunch. So the principal goes out at lunch, and this little girl was in the AM kindergarten. We have AM and PM.
Yes.
And so the kindergarten is the first people that come out. And so her class comes out, and she comes out, and she's kind of bedraggled. Her hair is all kind of askew. It's not neat and pretty anymore. And she's wearing the boa. It's just kind of over her shoulder and dangling down. And she doesn't have her gloves on and no purse. And she comes out. And so, I talking to the kids, asking how their day was and how that went. And then she hands me her boa, and she says, could you keep this while I'm at lunch? And I looked at her and I said, well, okay, but then why did you bring it out? Why didn't you just leave it in the classroom? And she looked at me like I was insane. And she says, well, it goes with the outfit. And yeah, anyway.
Because mommy had told her
That's
that.
exactly. Well, yeah, she knows. She sees mommy, and she was all together. The other thing that happened wasn't the same day, although you know what, it could have been the same day. There was a shooter in the neighborhood, and we were on lockdown. Then the first day of school, and PM kindergarten was supposed to arrive, and we were on lockdown, and so we had to call all the parents and tell them, I'm sorry, but you cannot bring your child to school today because we're on lockdown. And you know, those are kind of the crazy things that happen at a school that has nothing to do with academics. It has nothing to do with the kids. It has nothing to do with anything, but it completely
It disrupts everything.
disrupts your day.
To say the least. And we should actually do a talk about that, because remember when I was taking those classes and people were all upset about how their children couldn't get water, and dealing with lockdown is a totally different animal. So we should schedule
We'll talk
about that. But I will give you a personal thing about kindergarten. You remember I had to do kindergarten. I taught kindergarten for 4 whole weeks. It was not for me. Because at the time I was the music teacher, and the music teacher's job was September to June. We were on the track system.
Right.
The new kindergarten teacher was not coming until September, and so they needed somebody in there in June and July. So I went in, and June, July, she was coming August. Anyway, I went in there, and I was in there for 4 weeks, and we drew the letter B. We drew it in yellow. We drew it in white. Then we drew it in yellow. Then we drew it in green. Then we drew it in blue. Then we drew it in brown. Then we drew it in black. I was losing my mind. And the next day, we drew our names. And we made it with beans. Oh my God. Kindergarten teachers, I love you. I love you. I love you. And especially if she ever sees this, Miss Odo was the best kindergarten teacher I'd ever seen, because she had a song for everything, and she was on the floor doing those kids. But for me, it was not for me. And I remember I came out one day, my hair was all over the place, and the principal said, oh, was kindergarten that bad? And she called it kindergarten. It's kindergarten. I was like, you have got to get me out of there. Because, they go in the bathroom, I can't take off my belt. I can't open my ketchup. So, I am an upper grade teacher. That's 4th and up. And then there are the lower grade teachers. Praise to them. So, parents, please let you know. If your child is in the lower grade, and your child has any kind of love for your teacher, please love that teacher, because they are special.
They are.
Because I can tell you, I can't. Kindergarten, they need everything. And those shoelaces, little boys' shoelaces, are a disaster because of things that happen in the bathroom. That's all I'm going to say on that. Because I had an older teacher tell me one day, don't touch them. Don't. She said, they're stiff. Yeah, you all know what I'm talking about. But I've seen kindergarten teachers down there tying those little nasty shoelaces that have been through the trudge in the restroom. And so shout out to every lower grade teacher. I tell you, I treasure you, because when my principal gave me, a lower grade recently, and I told her, I said, that's really hard on me. I can't do that. And she said, oh, you look like, I'm like, no. I said, when my son was in that grade, it was hard on me, and I love him. And she thought it was funny, but I was serious. There was no smile on my face. But she found out I wasn't playing. I'm definitely an upper grade teacher. So, but anyway, back to going back to school. We're saying all these things because these are the behind the scenes that you as parents, you don't know what's happening. We love your children. We really do. We're taking care of them. We go through lockdown drills for them. We go through fire drills for them, and we are expected to put our life on the line for your children. So please know that we've gone through rehearsing every possible scenario. Even the shooters, we know how to block our doors and whatever we have to do to make sure that your children are safe. But first day of school, just know that when they show up, we've already put in a week of training and going over the list to see where your students are, and whatever special needs they may have, or any restrictions that you may have for them. We've already looked at those things and the principals have been there for a whole month before we show up as teachers, planning for what we need to know, looking at the student list, giving you an opportunity to call the office if you have any concerns. But we're ready. We're ready for them. And so when it's time to go back to school, encourage your child. Now let's talk about what you think needs to happen the night before.
Oh, the night before. Well, the child needs to get rest, which is not always easy. I mean, one of the things you remember about being a kid the night before school, it's like whether you're excited or terrified, I don't think it matters. It's hard to wrap your head around going back to school. You've been off for the summer, and you may be excited about going back to school.
But now it's different, because remember, when we went back to school, you had Labor Day, and then we went back to school after a holiday.
That's right.
But now the kids go back to school in August.
August, right.
And I don't know why that changed. Somebody said something about syncing it with the high school, and the high schools were synced with the college. All I know is it's still 100 degrees outside, and the kids don't want to go back to school.
Teachers don't want to go back.
No, and you've been up late at night, and now all of a sudden you need to go to bed because you have to go to school tomorrow, but it's still summer. And I'll never forget when our son, Grayson, reminded me what summer was supposed to be about, having fun, but again, another show. But, so tell me, the night before, yes, they need rest, but you can't get them to go to sleep. So what are some of the things that you found were good to help yours go to sleep? I know Grayson responded to a bath.
He did.
Story.
And I used to read to Grayson every night before he went to sleep. We'd sing songs too, I think.
Yeah.
But
But more when he started school, I was the one doing that at night. Mostly.
Okay.
Because we would try to read together a little bit. No, never mind. Anyway, well, I'm looking at him because Grayson's actually over there filming us. So, who did most of the reading to you at night, like by the time you started kindergarten?
By the time I started kindergarten, that was Tommy Joe.
Tommy Joe was still doing it then? Okay.
Well, okay. Actually, here's the thing. You guys had nights. You would switch off. So it wasn't like me one night, you the other night. It was you would tell me to go get ready for bed. Tommy Joe was mostly in charge of dressing me for bed. And
getting in his little Superman outfit.
Whatever he was going to wear.
Or Spider-Man.
And then you would read Dr. Seuss. You read more of the Disney stuff. So content was also split between the two of you.
But either way, that helped, right? That was a ritual that helped?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we basically had to power down rituals. And regardless of what the ritual is, you need to set up one.
Right. I don't think I think that this is important.
Thank
because
you, son.
because this goes beyond.
Grayson has something else.
Did you have a question?
No,
Yes, sir.
I remembered something.
Oh.
I'll make this brief. There were a lot of nights where you would read the story, and then Mom would come in with the funny story. So you would read something, and then Mom would come in a little later, and give me a story about her past. So basically, I don't know if this was your intent.
Well, that's right, because we would
I
always
remember
talk about what it was like for me at your age.
Yeah, but I don't know if this was your intent, but when you were telling me these stories, they were also people in my life, so that helped me understand who these individual people were, and why we kept them around, I guess. So
Why we kept them around.
It's true.
Okay, that's a good reason. That is a good reason to okay, I get it.
Yeah, but I think that this particular area goes beyond back to school, because this is really sets the stage for the child's love of learning. Kind of, it's like,
Yes.
if you read to the child every night, if you go through that, and and have your child participate in that.
Absolutely.
I think that's really that helps to make lifelong learners and lifelong readers, and that's always important when kids come back to school and just are in school. One of the things that I was thinking about when we first started talking about doing this podcast, and was this, and we forget that parents at one point were students. And I don't want to name names, mainly because I can't remember who they are, but I'm sure you remember this one parent at Marvin. You had at least one of their children in your class. She had daughters,
I know.
and she was very, very problematic at the school.
She had been a student at the school.
Well, that's what I'm going to say, is that she had been actually a student at the school, and she had had a terrible experience there. And so she came to school with her children anticipating that they were going to have a bad experience, because she did. And so whatever we do is kind of colored by our past experiences. So as a teacher, as an administrator, you always have to keep those kinds of things in mind. You're not when you're dealing with how students feel, how parents feel, that it's based on their prior experiences. But I think it's also important for parents to realize that, because just because they might have had a bad experience in school doesn't mean their child's going to.
Especially when you realize that you are now 20 or 30 years old, and those teachers that you had are most likely retired, and you have a whole new group of teachers that have taken over the school, a whole different group of administrators. So the experience has changed, generationally, and society has changed. So the whole process that what your child is going to experience, their learning experience is different. Even the teaching styles have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we do now, all the students now have a Chromebook.
Right.
Whether they are learning online or they are just coming to school, they are given a Chromebook once they enter the classroom. When we were in school, it wasn't like that. So the way students learn is different. So parents, we would like for you to understand that we need you to be open to the way things are. Because I even had a parent last week. She's a friend of mine, and she's like, I said, yeah, so this week we're working on the Edgy Protocol. She said, yeah, I'm like, what's up with all these games? And she said, I just told her, go read a book. I said, well, we still want her to read a book, but there are a lot of things that we do with the games because it helps them to get writing.
Uh-huh.
We just need them to start writing. And like there's one, it's called Iron Chef. And there's another one. Anyway, but back in the day, it used to be a Venn diagram where you had this over here and this over here and this in the middle, this different saying. But now they're calling them different things. But it's the process, the concept is the same. It has something, you put a word here to describe something and a word here. And then you have the secret ingredient that you're writing about. And now you can go back to that later on and make complete sentences. And then after you have complete sentences, you go back and you create paragraphs from those sentences. So the games and things that we're doing now are ways to help the students enter into the writing process. Or like doing plots. to help them get ready to really do graphing.
Right.
You know, there are lots of things that we do now that we didn't used to do. It was just do it. And now we make it more fun so that they can see it. Oh, speaking of that, I will tell you, when I started teaching, we were doing Mathland, and to this day, I love Mathland. I had a parent that came to me, and she said, I know you didn't tell Brittany to come home and tell me to fold my arms so she could write down something about my arms. I said, actually, I did. And she went, what? Well, in Mathland, you have very real things. There was like a tongue roller,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to, I never even thought about whether or not somebody could think about it. Can you roll your tongue?
I can't.
See? And that's what
And can Grace? Can you
you
see?
can roll your tongue.
See, it's a
It's a thing.
it is.
It's some people can roll their tongue and other people cannot. And we charted that. And it was the cutest little thing because we had kids drawing tongues on whether they were rollers or not. And then we were ears, whether they were connected or not. And do this. Fold your arms. You notice how my left arm goes over the top, but his right arm goes over the top. And I can't.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the other thing. I don't.
But that was one of the things that I did to teach graphing. And the students were able to graph.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people that could do that. Whether you kick with your left foot, kick with your right foot, whether you were left eye or right eye, all those crazy things we did. But there were ways to teach children how to do things. I didn't learn to do graphing that way.
No.
We just
No.
drew and graphed.
I don't think I graphed. I don't know what grade we graphed in. I don't know what grade we started that, but I'm sure
it wasn't fourth grade.
it wasn't fourth grade.
Well, in fourth grade, we were doing graphing, and my students loved it. They were having a good time, and then I said, "All right, now your assignment is to go home and find out in your family." And this parent, she thought the child was just not telling the truth. I'm like, "Yeah, really." And then I started showing her what we were doing, and then she got excited. So, with this, parents, show more excitement for what your child is doing when they bring something home that is different. Don't say, that's weird, that's odd. No, it's just different from the way you learn, but it doesn't mean that they're not learning.
Right.
They really are.
You know, one of the things that in looking back at my beginning of teaching, like it was 30 years ago almost. I mean, more than 30 years ago now. And when I went into the classroom, I had no prior training as a teacher, right? I was in a particular program
Yeah,
where
they
you
do
were
a
in the
lot more
classroom.
teacher training now than they used
Right.
to.
Well, yeah, but even so, I was in a program, intern program, and so I really had not had much experience in the classroom when I started teaching. And what was odd, I had a first and second grade class, combination class, my first year, and my daughter was just starting first grade. So I had this issue looking at what my daughter was doing next to what it was that I was doing, and I felt totally incompetent as a teacher because all of a sudden you find yourself in front of 30 plus kids in a classroom,
30, 35.
and you're there for 6 hours a day, and your job is to teach them, right? Is to do that. And I would one of the things that I did with my daughter before she went to school, before I went to school, was we watched Sesame Street. And you know, I would look at Sesame Street and see how Sesame Street was constructed, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, Sesame Street has writers, right? People whose job it is to write
They're
this
writers, and many of them are
stuff.
educators.
And then they are. Well, that's absolutely right. And so here I was trying to get the attention of the students and keep their attention and kind of entertain them. And so I think
you
that
didn't have any
And I
Muppets.
didn't have any Muppets or writers. You know, I was making it up as I went along. And I think when you talk about these games, these game protocols that you have, I think it's the effort to engage the kids in learning, because there are so many things that kids are involved with that that when I was a student we didn't have, right? So that when we wanted to access information, there was only really one way for
Oh,
us
you
to
had a
learn how to do that.
dictionary and you had an
Right, we
encyclopedia.
did that. We had to be able to read. Reading was the way that we had, it was our avenue into
That's
learning
how you
about
got
stuff,
information.
accessing information. Well, today
Absolutely.
kids, you know, I mean, whether it's a billion channels on television or whether it's video games that they have.
Or they Google it and just do text to speech kind of things. So they'll have the Google come on, and then the Google just tell them the answer. They don't even have to be able to read it.
Right,
Look, I was
absolutely.
reading something recently where there's a man who's a comedian, and he was telling a story, true story, of what was happening with the grandmother. And the grandmother was very frustrated with the grandkids, and the grandkids were frustrated with her. And she asked a question, and they said, "Oh," and they gave her the answer very quickly. And she said, "Well, how did you know that?" And he said, "We just Googled it." And he said, "Google," and she said, "Well, what time does that come on?" And the grandkids just started laughing at her. They were hysterically laughing, and she was offended. So he's saying to her, well, because he wanted to know what happened, and he was trying to explain to Grandma what Google was and why the kids were laughing, and telling the kids not to laugh because the way we accessed information was the electric company, Big Blue Marble, Sesame Street,
Right.
you know. So we all knew what time those came on. So Grandma was like, "Well, what time does Google come on?" It made sense to her. So, but the kids didn't. They just thought Grandma was funny. So it is kind of
And
funny.
grandma is funny.
It was kind of funny. So,
It is.
but yeah, but that's and goes to the whole point that we really need to make is how important reading is. Reading is so important. I don't. If you need to negotiate something with your child, we have something in school that we called, it was DEAR.
Uh-huh.
Drop
Everything and read.
everything and read. So no matter what time, what you were doing in the classroom, the teacher would just say it's DEAR time, and whatever you were doing, I mean, it could be in the middle of a math lesson. You'd stop and you had to pick up a book and read, and you'd read for whatever amount of minutes that the teacher set aside. But do things like that in your home on a regular basis. Do things like that. Um, Summertime writing and math and reading. Grayson told me one day, summertime is for having fun because there are statistics that say students lose up to 30% of their knowledge over the summer. So I wasn't going to let that happen to Grayson. So I would give him a writing prompt and a sheet of math that he had to do. And then one day he just told me, summer is for having fun. And I said, well, you can have all the fun you want right after you finish this writing prompt and this page of math. He didn't like that, but he did it. And so recently we were talking about it, and he still stood firm on that, even though he has now graduated from university. And I said, well, what did you ever miss out on doing in the summer because you had to do that? And he thought about it, he said, nothing. So, and to this day, it was to his advantage that he was doing all these things during the summer because when he went back to school, he hadn't lost all of that information because we made sure he kept practicing. So, back to school. It's time. I hope that you get something out of everything that we've babbled on about today. Um, I think it's a great time in a child's life. even if you didn't have a good experience, encourage them. You have anything else you want to say?
No, not really. I think it's an understanding. You know, it's an understanding that really you have three different people. You have the parent, the child, and the teacher, and they all come together from with different stuff, right? And different expectations and different fears and different problems that they have, and they come together and try to make sense out of education, and everybody kind of has to give the other people slack. You know, that
Yeah.
it's like, you know, it's understand where they are and where they're coming from, and that you're all there for the same reason.
Yes, and coming from the standpoint of being a parent, of dropping my son off to school, or even when I brought him to my own school, you know, there is a lot that goes into that, releasing your child to the school, even when they're on your own campus, which again is another podcast. because that's because they're on your own campus doesn't mean that they're having the best experience. But you have to give over to the teachers, because when the teachers know what's going on, teachers do intervene. And if the teacher is not intervening, and this is just to say, if you're getting to a place where you're finding your child is not having a good experience and you have other options on your campus, um, administrator, close your ear, ask for a change. It's okay, because we want everybody to have a good experience. Um,
Well, it's absolutely true, and it's something that honestly is frustrating for administrators. But I know from my experience, there were times when I had to have this kind of internal conversation with myself about why say no? Isn't it in everybody's best interest to say yes? You know,
Yeah.
if there's some issue that the child is having in the classroom, it could be with another student, it could be with a teacher, it could be with anything. Is it going to be better for the student to be in a different environment? Is it going to be easier for the parent to do that? Is it going to be easier for the teacher, for you, for everybody to do that? And sometimes as an administrator, it feels like your job is to say no to everybody, and but there are
Sometimes yes
times
is easier.
that you just have to say, you know what, yes, let me say yes to this. You know, it's like it's what's best for the child, and so yeah.
Yeah, and also don't make your child believe that they're going to school to be entertained, that they do have a role to play in all of this. Get them to school on time. We actually have a sign out in front of our school now where it calculates if your child is just late 5 minutes every day, how much that adds up to. And when you start to think about that, would it be okay for you to go to your job where you're 15 minutes late? And here I'm one line, and I'll have people show up 30 minutes late.
All right.
And all you have to do was roll over, push the button. I'm like, hey. So make sure your child values school. And they will value it from your attitude,
Yeah,
right?
they will.
And get them up, get dressed, give them a good breakfast. Because even though we have breakfast in the classroom here in California, um, sometimes they don't like it. So it's good to be able to give them something good. Um, I'm getting a note here, but I can't see it. It's too small. What does it say? What does it say?
And make sure to show up to back to school.
Oh, make sure you show up to back to school. Because I went on a rant last week after back to school because I was in a room with another teacher. So that meant all of our students were supposed to come to our back to school. See, I'm about to go off again. 2 classes. Now you know how many students there are. So let's just say 30 for her, 30 for me. All right, put together that's 60. We had 6 parents show up. 6. 6 parents. And I just recently moved up to 8th grade. So here's the thing that why this is important. Because all of you, oh, the little ones, they're so cute. Because one of the students came in. I'm like, where's your mom? Oh, she was over there with the younger sibling. But the thing is, somewhere around April or May, when the notices start to go out to parents that the child cannot participate in promotion, what can I do? Why didn't anybody tell me? How about you could have started a back to school night by knowing what the expectations were? But no, you were too busy or it wasn't cute enough. Why not come to back to school night? It is your opportunity to come and meet your teacher in person, see the classroom, and just go. It's not hard. And it's really make it a responsibility to show up for your child, not just when you're ready to argue with somebody, and in some people's cases, ready to fight. Because that's always an interesting thing when you have a parent on campus for awful reasons. And don't embarrass your child. Get dressed when you go to school. Yeah, I'm saying it. Remember that parent who called me one day? She came in with the pajamas on, walking on the back of her slippers. I said, does she know she was coming to see the male administrator? He said, she made the appointment. Oh, really? Take your bonnet off, do your hair, get dressed, come in looking credible. Just because you're a parent, don't show up looking any kind of way. You leave in your house, and trust me, your students do get embarrassed because they'll tell us that. They won't tell you because your mom or dad coming in the raggedy shorts or whatever. So I just got into the controversial part of the video because people are going to think I should be able to come look up however I want. Well, just think about it. And one of the things that I put up in my classroom, I told children that you should come to school because school is your job. And knowledge is what you get paid. If you miss a day of school, can you really afford to miss a day's pay? No. Come to school and make sure you get something out of it. And parents, when they get home, ask them, so what'd you learn today? And have a conversation about it. He said, if they say nothing, then start asking pertinent questions. Not like you're looking to dig, but know something about the grade level so you'll know what to ask.
Well, I think that's one of the important things to realize as a parent that it makes a difference when your child sees you and the teacher as a partnership between the parent and the teacher, because then the child feels more secure in where they are and won't try to play one side against the other.
Absolutely.
And it's easier, I think, on the teacher when the teacher knows that you have the parent support, and it's easier for the parent when you know the teacher, when you've had conversations with the teacher, when you feel secure that the teacher has the best interests of your child at heart. That's really important, and I think it does better for the child. I think the child feels better, feels more secure.
Yes. Because there are the teachers that you can tell are on the other side and they don't care. You do encounter those.
You do encounter that.
And if your child, some children can still learn in that environment.
Right.
Some children really can. And partly because they're used to dealing with people that are checked out. But make sure that you spend the time with your child so you'll know what's going on. Just give them that.
Okay.
So, anyway, I think we're here again. Dr. Lisa Leveque, accompanied by Dr. Thomas Leveque. We've given you lots of pearls of wisdom. I send you off. Thank you for joining us. I hope you take the information that we've given you and just think about it.
Thank you.
Toodles.